econ students, and welcome back to the Explainer series on demand and supply. This is the fourth part in our series. Please be sure to watch part 1, 2 and 3 if you have not yet done so. In today's video, we will investigate the factors of demand. We will therefore look at how factors of demand influence our equilibrium price and quantity, either through an increase or a decrease in demand. In order to do this, let's first look at the factors of demand. The factors of demand includes the price of the product, the price of substitute and complement products, the level of income of our households, also tastes and preferences, and lastly, our household size. The first factor, the price of the product. In order to explain the different factors of demand, let's consider the following product, a burger. Now, how will the price of the burger affect the quantity demanded? So remember, the law of demand states that when the price of the product increases, quantity demand would decrease. Consider the following demand curve for burgers, where price will be on our y-axis and quantity on our x-axis. And here we have our downward sloping demand curve. A change in price would therefore be illustrated as a movement along our demand curve. Our starting point will be at E1 with price 1 and quantity 1. For an increase in the price of burgers, our price would change from P1 to P2, and our quantity would decrease from Q1 to Q2, and this illustrated as a movement along our demand curve from E1 to E2. For a decrease in price, our price will now change from P1 to P3, and our quantity would increase from Q1 to Q3, and this illustrated as a movement along the demand curve from E1 to E3. It's important to note that only a change in the price of the product is illustrated as a movement along the demand curve. Any other factor would give rise to a shift of our entire demand curve. Next up, the price of substitute goods. In our example, a substitute product for burgers can be a sandwich. A sandwich can be seen as a substitute, as this fulfills the same need as the burger. Suppose that the price of sandwiches decrease. This in turn would lead to a decrease in the demand for burgers. The demand for burgers will decrease as consumers now rather consume a cheaper alternative, which is sandwiches. And this would be illustrated as an entire shift in our demand curve. Next up, let's look at the price of complements. In our example, French fries are a complement good to burgers. If the price of our complement good, French fries, decreases, this would lead to an increase in demand for burgers, illustrated as an entire shift of our demand curve. The next factor, income. Consider the following two consumers. The quantity of burgers demanded by consumer A depends on his income. Given his income, consumer A will demand 2 burgers. Consumer B, however, has a higher level of income. In turn, this means that consumer B will demand more burgers as opposed to consumer A. If income increases, the demand for the product will also increase. And this will be illustrated as an entire shift of our demand curve. Next up, let's take a look at tastes and preferences. Let's consider 2 examples in explaining how tastes and preferences can lead to a decrease in the quantity demand of burgers. Suppose that consumer preferences changes from burgers to burritos. As more consumers now consume burritos as opposed to burgers, the demand for burgers will therefore decrease. In our second example, a news article states that the consumption of burgers decreases your health. The article, however, proposes that a burger should be substituted for a sandwich, as this is a healthier alternative. The article will therefore influence the taste and preferences of consumers, which will lead to an increase in the demand for sandwiches and a decrease in the demand for burgers. And we illustrate this as a shift in our demand curve. Lastly, household size. The quantity of burgers demanded for a household which is smaller would also demand a smaller amount of burgers, as opposed to a household with a bigger amount of members, in turn demanding a greater amount of burgers. The relationship therefore states that if the household size increases, the demand for the product will also increase. And this illustrated as a shift of our entire demand curve. And that concludes our video for today. In our next video, we will look at how the factors of demand lead to a decrease or an increase in the demand curve. In addition, how this will affect equilibrium price and quantity. Thanks for watching. See you next time.